back to another Daily Dose. Wonderful people, thank you for tuning in. We are talking Wimbledon. We're going to wrap it all up. It is in the rear view mirror. And to wrap it up, it was only fitting that we brought back Christian Montegan from the First Serve. Christian, good to have you back on deck. It's been a little bit lonely for a big part of Wimbledon because of the time slots.
Yeah, I know. It's good to be back with you. Obviously, past week especially has just produced some really great tennis. I thought, both finals, you could argue the women's final was a massive shock. Iga Swiatek, taking it out in the style that she did, even the semi-final, dropping 2 games, then going on that 20 consecutive game win streak, which is phenomenal. And then obviously the men's final to top it all off. I think overall there were a lot of surprises, but at the end of the day, a lot of quality tennis on display, which is obviously awesome for the neutrals to witness.
Yeah, certainly was some really good tennis as we got through to the pointy end of things. There was obviously a little bit of Aussie heartbreak with the men's doubles. Rinky Hijikata couldn't quite get it done. They just seemed to, they've been so gritty and so performed so well, and they seem to, a little bit like Amanda Anisimova. I don't know whether it was a little bit of a yips or what it was, but they weren't delivering their best on the biggest stage.
It was just the backstory that was really made this journey so special, right? You come into this tournament. Obviously, Rinky met up with David Powell, the Dutch partner, saying, "Oh, do you want to team up for this upcoming Wimbledon doubles tournament?" It's funny because they never actually spoke together, right? They didn't really know each other personally, and for those sort of stories to arise and then to go on the run that they did just makes it all the more extraordinary and remarkable. And not only that, they saved match points in that semi-final, they actually saved match points in the first 2 rounds, which I think people are forgetting as well. So just phenomenal to even get to the final in the first place and knock off the seeds, knocked off the number one seeds in the semis. Just phenomenal. I thought obviously they were outplayed in the final, just one game too far, just a stretch too far for them, unfortunately. But I think Rinky, especially from an Aussie point of view, can really hold his head up high. He's obviously still a doubles champion in 2023, won the Australian Open doubles with Jason Kubler, fellow Aussie. So I think he's a very underrated when it comes to doubles. He's got the tricks up his sleeve that he can produce, just that magic. And I thought he complemented David Powell really well. Obviously, Powell's 6'6", the big serve, but Rinky could change up with the variety and that shorter player to give that different skill set. So hopefully they do partner up in the future. I think it'd be great to see.
Yeah, I think it looked like a good pairing. As we said, Pell seemed to lose his serve a little bit in the final, but as you said, they knocked out the number one seeds. They knocked out the number three seeds as well in the round of 16, Tim Putz and Kevin Kravitz, which, again, no mean feat to do that. And then, you get through this final. And then on the other side, you've got this phenomenal story that obviously we've seen some Brits win the doubles in recent time, in very recent memory over the last couple of years, right? But never has an all-British men's pair, not never, sorry, but not for 89 years. That's some sort of phenomenal time for an all-British team to win the British Slam.
Yeah, it's went back a while. Obviously, I was surprised at that stat arose. I thought an all British pair definitely would have won it sooner. So that really struck out to me. But I want to ask you a question, Chris. Probably put you on the spot a bit. But do you think this run from Rinky, and we obviously seen a few years ago, Kyrgios and Kokkinakis win the doubles at the Australian Open. Obviously, Hijikata, Kubler. Does it does it stain the doubles a bit to see these unseeded players always keep making these deep runs and knocking out these top seeds? Is it a bad look for the doubles, or is it just a case of, look, they just happen to find the right partnership and they're just playing really well? Is there something more to that?
Well, I think it just shows that obviously some of these players, you look at the women's side and the mixed doubles, Katerina Siniakova, right, made both finals. There's an element of good doubles players and a slightly different craft that they can dominate at that level, and we've seen that historically with a lot of pairings. But I think it's also that piece that, especially we see so many changing partnerships, you need two players to be on consistently, not just one player. So if you're playing singles, you're relying on, Yannick Sinner to be on, which we know is going to be reliable. But think about all the seeds that we saw drop out in the singles as well early on, and you think about if you're trying to get. Let's just put this into perspective for you. If you're trying to get Alexander Zverev and Felix Auger-Aliassime to both be on the same day, what are your odds of doing that? You
Not
know
very
what I mean?
high. Yeah.
Correct. And these are two top 20 players in the world in the singles, right? And so that's what you're looking at with the doubles. I think that's where you see some more variation. It creates some really cool stories. And then sometimes, it's the vibes, it's the momentum, it's all of those things and the story that comes behind it. And, the Special Ks is probably the greatest example of that. And we generally see some Aussie pairs make some good runs at the Australian Open, which is why it really surprised me, this whole Cash and Glasspool story. Being 89 years, you would have thought, home crowd support, a bit of momentum, you're up and about, you're playing together behind. Not the case. But then there's others that'll argue that, hey, yeah, it completely makes sense, and that's why the US Open mixed doubles just makes sense just as much as anything
Mm.
else.
Yeah, it's just always something that's sort of lingered in the back of my mind to say, it's weird how all these miraculous runs keep occurring in the doubles. Like, is it a bad look for it, or yeah, it's just a question that always pops up in my mind. But it's interesting that you're hearing that, from your perspective, and it is right because you need both players on the day to be at their absolute best, right? It's not an individual sport where you're relying on yourself to, push forward and consistently produce. You've got to rely on a teammate as well. So I guess that's where it comes into play. And you love to see those upsets, right? I think that's what creates these good storylines in the doubles, like a Rinky, for example, the Special Ks, all these good narratives. I think it is good for the sport. And we'll see that obviously now with the mixed doubles, which will be interesting to see. Obviously, more reaction as it comes to light as the US Open edges closer, how that all plays out. But it'll be interesting.
Yeah, and I think the point that talks to that is let's look at Lloyd Glasspool. He played with a different partner at the French Open. He and Cash then got back together leading into the grass courts, and they had essentially the perfect grass court season because they got that continuity, that combination together. They won Queens, they won Eastbourne, and then they won Wimbledon. Like that's a phenomenal run for two players to be up at that level. But it comes down to the consistency, and again, maybe they bring something in that's draws more to encouraging more singles players to play doubles more often because you essentially need to qualify rather than more wild cards and essentially walk up entries being the case. But that might create a bit more reward, but it might create a bit more frustration too. But we've seen it in the women's game where the likes of Goff and Pagula were at the top of in the top 10 in both rankings, and it's doable. It's a big workload though when you think about what they go through over these 14 days. So we'll wait and see. I don't know if there's a right answer or a wrong answer, and I don't think I've really answered the question or solved it, but that's what I do on here. So let's move on to the quickly. We'll recap the other results very quickly from the women's doubles. It was Kudermetova and Aliza Mertens getting it done, which was nice again after they knocked out Olivia Gadecki. And in the mixed doubles, I touched on it before. It was again two unseeded pairings, but how Katerina Siniakova is not seeded in mixed doubles, I'm not quite sure. Especially playing with Sam Verbeek, who's not exactly a mug either. And then you had on the other side Joe Salisbury, who was unseeded as well. So, but Siniakova and Verbeek got that done in two tie breaks. But let's talk the women's and men's finals. And there's some that will say this was a bit of an anti-climax with the women's love and love. I would just say that this was one of those moments where the occasion got to the less experienced player.
And you could tell that as soon as both players walked on the court, you could see Swiatek with the headphones in, listening to the music. You could tell she was ready, laser focused. Then on the other side, Anna Samova, you could tell very timid, nervous, really soaking the atmosphere, looking at the crowd, thinking, "Oh God, this is my first slam. How am I going to cope?" And Swiatek's been there before, right? She's won 5 majors before this final coming in. She was prepared, she was ready, and from the first ball, you could tell it was heading in one direction. I mean, I didn't rule out Anisimova completely after the first set. We've seen, players switch momentum and turn the tide, but it just had a different feeling about it. Swiatek was just, her intensity is just unreal. It's scary at times. And to see her get back to that level, because, this is her first title since winning that French Open last year. So it's been a big drought for her. And to get over the line, deep into that second set, there must have been a few nerves there because because she hasn't been in that position for a long time, right? Being able to serve out for matches, the nerves could have creeped in there. Give Anna Samova a couple of games, and who knows what could have happened. So, look, credit to Swiatek. I think on the grass, she's proven a lot of doubters wrong coming in. Obviously, her least preferred surface out of the lot, and to come in as a number 8 seed as well. I mean, we were discussing that, Chris, before the tournament, how low she's fallen, and to do that and get it over the line where she's probably been ranked in the top 2, top 4 seeds in previous Wimbledons and not been able to get past the quarters. Just a marvelous achievement. But for Anna Samova, I think the storyline will be more about her and her lack of showing or her performance because people calling it embarrassing. I tend to have a bit more sympathy for her. These things happen. The nerves can get the better of you, and I do feel sorry for her because of her background story, coming back from taking that break for her mental health, losing her father a few years ago, and she beat Sabalenka in the semis. Like this is no, she she is a top player. Got back into the top 10 now for the first time, which is great. When the new rankings release, she's got a lot to be proud of. She can keep her head held high. It's just disappointing that the scoreline doesn't really reflect that.
Yeah, I think there's a few things to take away. First of all, if you're going to have one of these days where you're absolutely off, the worst person in the world I think you can come up against is Iga Swiatek.
Mm,
Because even if you're playing an Arena Sabalenka is just as likely to take the foot off the throat a little bit, and you can grab a game or two back and add a bit of respectability. It's that they all laugh and make light of the Iga's bakery, but she did it in the semi final. It was love and two,
mm,
right? Like this is what Iga Swiatek does at her best. And when you look back through and have a look at some of the names, if you go from the third round on, she played Danielle Collins, Clara Towson, Ludmila Samsonova, Belinda Bencic, and Amanda Anisimova. There's no mugs in that, but in none of those, like maybe Samsonova in the second set looked like she got close enough in a 7-5, but yeah, there was very little happening there, very
mm.
little going on in terms of opportunity for someone to get into that match. She was clinical, and again, you touch on the fact that she hasn't had much success at Wimbledon before. I think the combination of the fact that she came in as the number 8 seed, and also the fact that she had those few days off because she went out of the French Open early. We know it's not easy.
Mm.
It's a short season, the grass court season. Much to my dismay, I'd love to see heaps more grass court tennis. I love it. I think it's enthralling to watch. But she went to Mallorca, had a few days of hitting, and built into it. So there was less pressure, all those things. I think that all combined, and it's going to be interesting to see how she comes back next year as the defending champion, depending on what she does at the French Open. And on top of that, is this the start of something? She's now one tournament away from a career slam.
It's funny, after she got knocked out of Roland Garros against Sabalenka in the semis, the Polish media really had a go at her and really questioned her performances, and she didn't really take that too well. And she said after this final win at Wimbledon, she sort of hit back at the Polish media saying, "Look what I've done now with my new coach. Don't judge, just let us do our thing," which I thought was really good from her side. So. Look, like I said before, she's proven a lot of doubters wrong that she can do it on this surface, and that's the confidence and reassuring factor she needed now heading into future Wimbledons and trying to defend that title now in 2026, because we know she's capable on the clay. We call it the Queen of Clay for a reason. Yes, it didn't go her way this year, but her form, it's been very, downward slope ever since, the start of the season, even at the back end of last season. Obviously, the doping case really took a toll as well on her mental health as well. So that's another thing to take into consideration. So I just think at the end of the day, she deserved it in this tournament in particular. The way she played just really raised her level. The way she steps into the court, she just doesn't allow her opponents to breathe. And that was a problem for Anna Samorova. Just couldn't get a foothold in the game whatsoever. Didn't get a chance to win a game or two, get on the board and really, take something from that and actually push herself forward. I think, it gets to that scary moment for Anna Samorova in the match where she's not thinking about being able to win the match, just being able to actually get a game on the scoreboard. And once you're in that position, then there's no coming back from that. And that's all credit to Swiatek.
It's the old golf analogy of when all you're focused on is the water in front of you, all you're going to
Mm,
hit the ball into is the water in front of you, right? At what point? And I
exactly.
wonder that at what point did she start thinking about, oh no, it's going to be 6-love, and then oh, it's going to be love and love, and and there's been lots of comparisons drawn to that Steffi Graf final,
Mm,
many years ago, and I think very different career trajectories in terms of where the two players are. As you said, Anisimova now at a career high of 7, and I expect her to continue to push that up. And again, being a top 8 seed potentially and likely at the US Open if she can just continue some form for the next couple of months, that should bode well. A home slam. And again, she'll be better for the experience. There's not many people that boast a record like Iga Swiatek does at Grand Slam finals. And again, it
mm.
was kind of fitting that she won 6-love to make her Grand Slam finals record 6-love.
Yeah, I think Anna Samorova on her side, she's got to take a lot of positives out of this campaign, not dwell on the negatives, losing love and love to, like you mentioned, a player who is just so prone to be able to do these to basically anyone on the tour, right? She's just so dominant when she's in that zone. It's very difficult to break out of. So, I mean, for Anna Samorova, for where she was, I mean, she was qualifying for this event at this time last year. I mean, to get to the stage where she is now, you've got to really just look forward and think, look, I've just got so much of my career still ahead of me. Still 23 years of age, world number 7 now, new career high. Coming into the US Open, as you mentioned, home slam, big chance again to really get some more ranking points and keep climbing the rankings. And yeah, at the same time though, it could hamper her. It depends which way she sort of takes it. It's up to her and her coaching team, her support staff around her to really rally around her and give her that support she needs, right? because she probably is more of a confidence player. And we saw that at Wimbledon with the results she got, and you could tell she was really growing into the tournament. And I mean, that's why nobody expected this result whatsoever. You at least expected it to be close. Anna Samova, we know on the grass, that surface really suits her game style. You saw that against Sabalenka, being able to neutralize her power and really take it to her. So, look, at the end of the day, Swiatek is Swiatek, and when she's in that mood, there's no stopping her. So, all credit to her.
100%. Looking forward to as we get around to the next Grand Slam. As I said, I think Anna Samova, if she can get that mental piece right, she's defending next to no point. She was a first round exit last year at the US Open, so even a quarter final run or something like that could see her quite a way up the ranking. She could be nipping on the door of the top 4 or 5 as it sits, especially if we see a repeat of Wimbledon. Let's turn to the men's final. And look, I did tip this as a 4-setter, but it was kind of not. It just didn't have the vibes. I don't know. If we set the bar too high after what we saw at Roland Garros.
Yeah, potentially. I mean, look, it wasn't the most high quality of finals, no matter what people say, because they try and hype it up so much. And Sinner Alcaraz, once they watch it, they go, oh, one of the best finals ever. I don't think it reached that stage. There were a few good rallies, especially on set points. Probably almost close to every single set point that was, and match point included, just incredible. Just the high pressure of those moments to be able to execute and produce those highlight reels was exceptional. But in terms of the actual game itself as a whole, yeah, it didn't live up quite to the billing. But at the same time, I think these were two players who knew what was on the line, especially for Sinner, right? Coming in, having 3 consecutive championship points, the pressure was on him, on his shoulders to deliver. Because if he went 0-6 in his last 6 meetings against Alcaraz, then look, in terms of mentally, that mindset, it's very tough, right, to bounce back and regroup. So for him, after losing that opening set, being up a break as well, 4-2, you thought, right, here we go again. Alcaraz is going to get on top and it's going to be the same old story. But to Sinner's credit, I thought the faster conditions did suit his game a bit more, especially on the forehand side, being able to move Alcaraz a bit more. Carlos as well, he wasn't on. He wasn't 100% in terms of, his performance. A lot of double faults. Played a few drop shots when he shouldn't have. So a few choice selections where you sort of scratched your head and thought, okay, that wasn't on. That's a bit bizarre. But you see that from Alcaraz. His level can dip more than Sinner, and that's why Sinner has more opportunities in these types of games to sort of get the better of Carlos, and that's eventually what transpired in this game. So, look, really happy for Sinner, given what happened in Paris last month, to be able to rebound as quickly as he did. All credit as well to Darren Cahill and the rest of his team to be able to get him in that clear headspace to just push it to the side, focus now. That's done in the past. You can't change that, and then to do what he's done at Wimbledon, just phenomenal. So yeah, props to him.
Yeah, certainly. I think you got to take your hat off. It was, considering that, he was on the ropes only a couple of matches ago against Grigor Dimitrov, and I did see someone sort of raise the question: does this mean that if Grigor didn't tear his pec, he might have finally made it to his pinnacle? I find that hard to believe. I think Dimitrov would have won that match from where he was. So it's a wonderful sliding doors piece for him, for Sinner, sorry. But hopefully Dimitrov's back with us soon. But as you said, it means that he is essentially that one match at the French Open away from a career slam, Yannick Sinner as well. And I don't doubt that we will see 3, 5, 7, 10 more of these matches between these two, allowing them both to stay fit and healthy and are able to continue their careers over the next, 10, 15 years. I saw a meme the other day and it was, sort of somebody in a tennis outfit crying, and it's like, tennis players waking up after the Wimbledon final, realizing that they're going to have to fight past both of these guys to win Grand Slams for the next 10, maybe 20 years.
Yeah.
And realistically, like, they're both in their early 20s, right? So they could be going, look at Novak Djokovic. I was actually looking the other day, the oldest player in the top 200 at the moment is Stan Wawrinka, who's 40 and still going around. These guys could still be going around for another 10, 12, 15 years. And that could be quite a dynasty. But again, you can't expect that all the Grand Slam finals they play are going to be exactly, what they delivered in Paris, because it will lose its luster if that's what they deliver every time. It will become the ordinary. So I think if you look back over the history of, the Federer Nadal matches, Djokovic against Nadal, these sorts of matches, again, some were wonderful and some just weren't. It's the reality of it. It's what happens. And as you said, had Alcaraz won, it would have kind of started to become a bit of a hoodoo and a bit of a question. And certainly well done to Yannick Sinner. I really like the interviews after the game. You can tell the respect and the friendship between the two of them. And I love that that's, it's kind of this, frenemies sort of thing when they get out in the court. There's absolutely no quarter given, but they are clearly very good mates off the court and it's played in the right spirit. So it's really exciting. And look, you'd be a brave man to back against them clashing in the US Open final little bit later this year, because the biggest challenger was Novak Djokovic, you'd have to think, and he clearly isn't the man he once was, and he's as much as admitted that. And it sounds like we might be on the start of maybe a 12-month farewell tour to Novak that might culminate at Wimbledon next year.
Yeah, I think looking at it, if Djokovic isn't 100% fit, you think who else on the tour is going to compete with these two? You look at Taylor Fritz, who I thought was actually relatively impressive against Alcaraz, was what, one set away from taking it to a fifth. I think he's probably at the moment the closest challenger, and Zverev has fallen off a bit. I think he still has to do a lot to get back to where he once was. And he admitted after Wimbledon that X in the first round, he's got to really focus mentally, maybe even take a break away from the game, reset, and go from there. Because at the moment, Sinner and Alcaraz just on absolute another planet. It's just unbelievable. And you mentioned the rivalry. I think it's just in great. The embrace at the net, being able to congratulate both teams during the speeches. Even when they practice together, you see those videos on social media. Walking past each other, a quick hello, a hug, and embrace. It's really a healthy rivalry, right? Where the respect is so there, and it's just great for the sport, right, to see that. So yeah, definitely a lot more finals from these two to come. But it's funny how we always just prematurely look ahead and just assume that 10 to 15 years they're just going to dominate and steamroll these two. You look at someone like João Fonseca, for example. I know he's still got a bit of growing to do, but 18 years of age, he's been touted as to sort of knock on the door to create this new big three. But like Tsitsipas, Zverev, Medvedev, these types of players were tipped to also be there for the next 5 to 10 years, and look what's happened to their careers recently. So things can change quickly in tennis. It depends as well on the health, the fitness. You've got to obviously be there in the first place, right? So it's definitely still a long way away until we sort of pencil in these two players featuring in multiple Grand Slam finals. It's obviously likely, given the tennis that they're producing. It just seems no one can touch them at the moment because they're just so dominant on the tour. So yeah, we'll see who pops up, which 14, 15-year-old, someone's probably listening to this now thinking I'm going to be the next one to step up and create a new rivalry. So that's the beauty of tennis. You don't know what's around the corner, but let's just hope that Alcaraz and Sinner stay fit and healthy, because it's brilliant for the sport.
It certainly is. And, you look at the rankings and you start to look for who that next one is to come through. And realistically, when you look at players who are younger than them in the top 100, there are a couple of names. There's some names there that if you look at it, Pesci Pericard or Alex Mickelson, I don't know that they're necessarily going to be the ones. But when you look at, maybe a Jakob Mensik, even Ben Shelton's a little bit, he's similar age to Carlos Alcaraz. He's in between the two of them. Artifice, as I said, Mensik, Bruna. There are plenty of other players around that age that have, if they can find the best of their game. It's just about that consistency. But as you said, when these guys are 27, there's going to be people that are 14 and 15 now that are then the 20, 21-year-olds looking to take them down. And that's the joys of tennis. We just need to wait for the next one, the young Mirror on Draver or someone else to come through the equivalent of.
And those players you just mentioned, Arthur Fierce, for example, that was who, Sinner and Alcaraz were when those players were coming through, right? When you had Tsitsipas and Zverev, they were the ones tipped as the ones to really take the mantle from the big three of Nadal, Federer, and Djokovic. They sort of did for a little bit, but then these new players such as Sinner and Alcaraz took the throne instead of them. Which is obviously the foreseeable future is tipped to see them do that for the next 10 to 15 years. So again, it's difficult to predict because you see the talent, the youth coming through on the women's side as well. Not to mention there's just so many teenagers that their fathers are training them. Every single day they're just putting hours and hours on the court. It's just unreal. The technology that goes into the game. It's just it's obviously easier back then to produce these beasts of athletes that we're seeing now from Alcaraz and Sinner, where you just think, like, how on earth are you going to knock these players off their perch? It's insane. So we'll see what happens. It's exciting, definitely.
It certainly is. And I've just done a quick scrape a little further down the ranking to see a couple of other names, and names that we've heard before. Darwin Blanche is one of those who's, he's 17. Maybe he becomes that one. He's still very early in his career. Justin Engel, the German, as well. He's he's almost cracked the top 200 already at 17. So there are names there. It's just about, how do they find that acceleration through the rankings? How do they take the opportunity? Fonseca a year ago wasn't anywhere near the top 50. So we'll watch for these names. It's exciting. Hopefully, we don't hype them too much and put too much pressure on them because it's a lot to take on, as we've seen with a lot of the names that have come and gone. But we'll wait and see. Before we wrap this one up quickly, Christian, there's always a bit of, I guess, contention, especially off the back of that final result in the women's and how quickly it was over around the prize money equality. And tennis has been a leader
Mm.
in inequality when you look back historically. Going back to Billie Jean King and the 9 women that got together and drove the equality piece in women's tennis in the mid to late 1900s. It's an interesting piece. There's been some contentious or different suggestions about how do we level it out. And an interesting argument that I heard the other day is in this match, like once you drop a set in women's tennis 6-love, you kind of almost, you're almost at your standing 8 count, right? Like you're in a lot of trouble. Like it's a hard way back. Whereas in the men's, you can drop a 6-love set, and while it's tough, it's still not nearly the unovercomable piece in a Grand Slam because it's 5 sets. And we have had 5 sets before on the tour finals in the late 80s and early 90s, I think, from memory for the women's. And I heard Lindsay Davenport talk about the opportunity to play 5 sets the other day.
Mm.
It's certainly an interesting piece. And one of the proposals, and I don't know what your thoughts are, was that, maybe reduce the first, 3 rounds to 3 sets for men's and women's. And then the 4th round or quarterfinals on become 5 sets for men's and women's. I guess the hard piece is how do you convince the women to say, well, you've actually got to do more work now for the same amount of money?
It's a very prickly situation because now you sort of have to alter history, right? You mentioned to change the first few rounds to play 3 sets instead of 5. Like that's just how are you supposed to do that in term? I know different rules have changed and it goes for every single sport, right? Things change, but that I just feel is so significant in terms of history and the what the sport really stands for in terms of men's tennis. We're so known for 5-set tennis, right? Women's is 3 sets, and to ask women to all of a sudden play 5 sets. We saw Jessica Pegula mention after her loss at Wimbledon. She's not a fan of it, right? She says it's boring. Like it doesn't engage the younger fans coming through because the attention span's getting lower and lower. So there's all these different opinions, flying out there. I don't necessarily agree with her because I love personally 5-set tennis. I think it's the biggest thrill that we've got. And if you're a tennis fanatic and a lover, then there's no problem. I could sit on the couch for 10 hours straight or
Yeah.
or 3 days, and like a John
I think,
Isner back at Wimbledon, just keep watching. I don't really care, to be honest. It's just so many different variables, and you've got these opinions from both players and fans. But I think what's most important is what the players feel, right? Because we've seen the schedule is it's starting to get more packed now. Obviously, 2-week masters instead of one for most of them. Yeah, the calendar's starting to really congest, and we've seen players such as Alex de Minaur come out and say, "Look, I just need a break because I'm just burnt out, and physically as well." Like, where's the break in the
yeah,
calendar? We've only got a few weeks in December, and that's about it. Then you go back on the road, and you've got to compete. So there's all these different things that you've got to take into consideration.
I think there's 2 different arguments here, but both of them very valid. One is the calendar is too congested, and there needs to be some sort of option for players not to be required to turn up to all of these matches. And there's obviously risks that they've got to meet certain number of tournaments, all these sort of things, especially if you're at the higher end of the rankings, all these sorts of bits. And I understand it impacts their financials as well. And there's the piece then when you get there, and if you're Jessica Pegula, why would you say yes? I want to play more tennis when the prize money is not going to increase? But it's about that equality piece. It's about
Mm,
balancing the ledger out. And while I understand that they might think that 5 sets might be boring, if we're talking about just pitching tennis and entertainment piece, well, let's just play fast 4 tennis then. Like,
mm,
where do we draw the line? And I get the history piece as well, but I don't know, from my point of view, the next biggest tournament after the Grand Slam is a little thing called the Davis Cup, and that's had a number of format changes. It
mm,
still doesn't mean it's any less significant of a tournament. The reality of it is that it might actually create a point. And let's have a look at this tournament. I think a big part with the men's tournament this time around was a lot of these players are so fatigued by the end of it that we're not necessarily always getting the best tennis. Especially when you've got the French into Wimbledon, the short turnaround, all those sorts of things. Would we be in a different situation if Carlos Alcaraz hadn't spent quite as much time on court? I think he'd spent nearly 17 hours on court coming into this final. If we're looking at 12 hours and Sinner's got 8, is that a different story? Do we see a more high intensity, peak performance? We might not. It's a lot of
mm.
coulda, woulda, shouldas, but I'd just like to see it being uniform for the men's and the women's. I think that's at the end of the day, it's equal work, equal pay. I'm a big believer in driving women's sport, as I know you are as well. Like we are absolutely enthralled by the women's tennis, And I can't say categorically, but can you imagine that semi-final, Anisimova versus Sabalenka, and it goes into a fourth or fifth set, and you're at the edge of your
Mm.
seat watching the world number one try and claw her way back from 2 sets to 1 down. Like, you can't tell me that's not a narrative that even a casual fan would enjoy. I get the attention span piece. It's a bit like cricket and
Mm.
those sorts of things, but like I said, if attention span is our main focus, I think we need to work out what our main priorities are. Is it equity? Is it about equity and parity? Is it about what the players want? In which case we need to review the calendar as well, as you said. Or is it
Mm.
about a balance of that with entertainment? So I think there's a lot of things, and it's not an easy solution, as you say. And then the final piece, as you touched on, is history. We're clearly not going to solve it here. And look what happens when you do change things. Ask the US Open about their mixed doubles.
Yeah, exactly. It's a legitimate question to ask, and it's a good debate. But I think a lot of people are scared to come out and actually discuss this because you get a lot of comments or replies saying, "Oh, it's sexist because you don't think women deserve the same pay." Like we're not saying that at all. Obviously, women's sport it's come so far leaps and bounds. I personally love watching it, as do you, Chris, and many others. It's just it is you can't look away from the fact that it's a bad look when you got Swiatek winning 6-love in 57 minutes. You've got Alcaraz Sinner playing a four-setter that takes over 3 hours to complete. That 5.5 hour match at the French Open final. Um, it's like where do you draw the line in terms of prize money? I understand the equality side of it, and yes, we do want the gender gap, not just in sport but just worldwide in terms of just jobs in general to the gap to be shortened. But at the same time, it's like can you do something to improve that and make it as if okay the women are playing 5 sets, the men are playing 5 sets, or make it the 3 sets and 3 sets of both sets of the tours. I think you've got to try and find the way to balance it and just find that wavelength. I think at the moment it's been a real struggle for the big major tennis governing bodies to come to that. But I guess now that this agreement's in place, it's hard to really backtrack and say, oh look, the women aren't going to get this the same amount of money as the men. It's going to be a bad look for them if they backtrack on that as well. So they put themselves in this very sticky situation.
I guess the last question I'll leave you with on it, Christian. Imagine you're a punter. You've paid somewhere around $3,000 to $5,000 on Saturday. You've watched the men's
Mm.
doubles final that was over a lot quicker than we expected. You then go into the women's singles, and essentially you've had the best part of 2.5 hours of entertainment. We talk about entertainment, bang for your buck. Does that dilute then that money that people are paying? Like again, that's a big part of what drives these events is the ticket sales.
Mm.
It's hard, right? Like, and again, it's one of those things. But if you can guarantee that, that's going to be an hour and 40 minutes rather than 50 minutes at worst
Mm.
case, well, again, it's a bit more entertainment. It's a bit more bang for your buck. And in the current cost, of living worldwide and all those other sorts of things, it's another consideration. Again, I'm going to put it out there. I will categorically say there is no perfect answer to this, but
Mm.
it's about, as you said, having the conversation, working it out. And I want to see equity. I want to see players, and I want to see it not just at the Grand Slams. I want to see it, at the Masters 1000s, all these other tournaments too. We need to be better at those tournaments in terms of delivering equal prize money for the women when they are doing equal work. But at these ones, it's also quite easy to see the counter that a Novak Djokovic, a Yannick Sinner, a Carlos Alcaraz could say, well, I'm playing 5.5 hours for the same amount of prize
Mm.
money that they're playing an hour to 2 hours for. So we might leave it at that, mate.
Yeah.
It's not going to be solved today. It's not going to be solved anytime soon. But I think it's a really good contentious issue to have a bit of a chat about. And we'd love to hear what people think in the comments. But as always, if you want to talk more tennis, if you want to look at more tennis, hear more tennis, the first serve on SEN, thefirstserve.com.au. Plenty more tennis there. It'll be covering everything in between now and the US Open as we head towards the next Grand Slam, which can't come soon enough. Christian Montegan.
Yeah, looking forward to it. Obviously, a lot more tennis to come with a couple of Masters tournaments before that. And yeah, looking forward to cover it all with you as well as we lead up into the US Open.